Okay, it's 2:00. We all present. Can I ask the council, IT, any issues? Okay, that's good. I'm not, is anybody interacting with the inquiry? We had obviously 2 people this morning. Okay, as long as he's able to, because obviously we can't see him on the screen, so I'm just conscious that I don't want to preclude him from the inquiry if he's trying to get online. But I will assume, unless I'm told otherwise, that everything's working fine.
So in relation to Mr. Ogborn, that just brings into play the site visit, because when he was on screen earlier, he said he'd quite like to see you on site. He may not have heard that we certainly teed up the prospect of you doing it unaccompanied. Certainly, I don't know whether Mr. Ogborn knows that obviously he wouldn't be able to say anything evidentially to you. He could say there's, the tree or the field or whatever it's going to be. We don't think it's necessary for him to be there. If he wanted to desperately, obviously it would mean that someone from our team, therefore, and that seems quite a lot of resources for something that probably isn't required. I was just wondering if he does emerge, or somehow we can get a message to him to say, look, can we just regroup on that point and see whether he'll stand himself down. If not, we'll work around it, of course.
Yes, okay, no, that's a good point. So if Mr. Ogborn does appear, or he is listening now, then at the end of the inquiry this afternoon, I will ask about the site visit again, and if he wishes to make any comments. But it seems to me that there is no need for presence on the site. But if one person appears on the site, then I have to have representation from both main parties. But I'll deal with that at the end of today's session. Just one point before lunch, or actually this morning, there was a discussion about 2 of the plans, and I did ask the appellant, although it didn't set a timescale on a response, but it was in relation to whether it provides sufficient details of access. Have you had an opportunity to consider that?
Over our pitter platters in the local street food market, we discussed it, but what I haven't got for you is a formal response now. We think there's a workaround. We've got an example of a similar scheme that went through on a similar basis. So I think the best place for me to do that, so you've got it in one place, is to set out enclosings for you. And so then you can make a decision, obviously, on that alongside the broader point about accepting the plans on a sort of Wheatcroft basis.
Yes, okay. I note in the council have not raised an objection to that either, so I'm happy to take that in closing. Anything else over lunch I need to be aware of?
Just some positivity. The site visit note is being drawn up and is subject to one addition is being finalised, so that will be with you today. The 106 has landed, and we will get a copy of that to you today as well. I can't promise every very last line is agreed, but I think it's pretty much there. Okay, thank you. So before I leave today, I'll have a copy. Yes, okay, thanks. So over lunch, I have been reading the Statement of Common Ground, just to say thank you to both parties for getting together and discussing heritage matters. And actually, that's answered most of the questions I had about the impact on the setting of the Grade 2 listed building, Bottisham House. So I'm not going to spend any time on that, actually. Similarly, I don't have any direct heritage questions. However, I do have some observations to make, and how you choose to address this, either in this session or in the planning evidence you give. So just a point to note. So as you're all aware, because it's set out in the Statement of Common Ground, there's an understanding that there's a statutory duty under the Planning List of Buildings and Conservation Areas, Consent 1990, to have special regard to the desirability of preserving listed buildings and their settings, and considerable importance and weight should be attached to that desirability. So that's the first point. And so when I've read through the Statement of Common Ground in terms of the main Statement of Common Ground, and also I do note that similar comments were made by the previous appeal inspector, but I am obviously assessing a different scheme. It seems to me that, well, it's unclear to me whether considerable importance and weight has been attached to the less than substantial harm that's been identified. And the reason I say that is because in the Statement of Common Ground, if we can all open the document, and it's also repeated in the proofs as well, but we don't need to go there. So if we skip to the page 22 of the main statement of common ground, it's been identified that there is harm, and then the two columns, there's a weight applied by the appellant and a weight applied by the council, and the previous inspector's comments on weight as well. And in both cases, that says low to moderate, and it does say weight, harms and weighting. So I'm not clear whether the implication there is because there's less than substantial harm, whether that low to moderate meant low to moderate less than substantial harm, or it was low to moderate weight to the less than substantial harm. And I know it's semantics, but it's obviously important in terms of the statutory duty. So could I ask the appellant just to come back on that point, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're bang on point. It's not clear enough in the documents in terms of identifying in the first place the harm, and then secondly, the weight that needs to be given to it. And in truth, I think that's a fair point in respect of the previous appeal decision too. It's not immediately clear how it's been done. What we will do in our evidence in chief for sure with Mr. Brown is make sure that distinction is drawn clearly, and you can understand how we have gone about the planning balance. First, of course, the heritage policy test in terms of whether the public benefits of the scheme outweigh the heritage harm just in isolation, and then the wider, ultimately very special circumstances test. But no, absolutely right. So you're bang on point, and we get it completely.
Yes. Okay. So, and the council, you can address, yes, you can address that in chief. That's fine. So I can leave that point. Similarly, the statement of common ground also states that there is no conflict with policies EMV 11 and EMV 12. And again, I think you need to probably address this in the planning evidence. However, I'm not sure that that is necessarily correct. Having read the policies, my take on this is that harm is harm. And I take the point that there's no disagreement that the public benefits outweigh that harm, but it doesn't displace the harm. So could you address that as well, either now or in evidence? Just to be clear, is there, in your view, is there conflict with those policies or not? So if you need some time before giving evidence, then I'm happy to give you an adjournment.
Thanks. So we won't need an adjournment. I'm sure there'll be a natural pause in the process where we can just catch up with that. But absolutely, same point applies. We'll unpack that for you as clearly as we possibly can in evidence in chief.
Okay, and my final point, which is again a similar point really, but I just want to make it clear. So as far as my decision is concerned, I will need to do a separate heritage balance. So I'll need to balance the heritage harms versus the public versus the benefits. And if there are sufficient public benefits that outweigh the harm, then that test is satisfied. But that doesn't mean to say that that harm doesn't exist when it comes to doing the greenbelt balance. So yes, okay, that's understood. Yes, okay, I don't need to go there. That's fine. And that is it, actually. I've nothing else, no further observations to make on heritage. So, and I do appreciate there are heritage experts here who might be disappointed not to be giving evidence. But no, I don't have anything else to add on that point. Okay, thank you. Yes, and the gentleman on the end, sorry, Mr. Crawford, I don't have any comments either on character and appearance, given there's no disagreement, and I know you've covered Greenbelt as well. So if you wish to stay, you're more than welcome, but I won't be asking further questions. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, the roundtable session is concluded on other planning matters, including heritage. Yes, I mean, you're more than welcome to stay, but it's just making the point. I won't be asking further questions. Okay, can I ask Mr. Phillips, do you need some time? Do you need a few minutes just to prepare yourself? And where are you sitting as well? That's the other question. Yes, okay, that's fine. Yeah,
just give me a few minutes to ship some documents over.
Yeah, I don't need to adjourn. If we don't need to adjourn, we'll just stay in the room and when you're ready, just give me the indication. Also, Miss Phillips, make sure you have a glass of water. And Mr. Smythe, if you know which documents we might be referring to, it could save time if you can list them at the start. If not, then don't worry.
I5.
Sorry, I5, okay.
Yes. The AMR. And I4 is the AMR.
Okay, thanks. And I'm sure you heard that, but I4 as well.
Are you ready? I believe I'm ready.
Okay, Mr. Smythe, in your own time.
If I can introduce Mr. Phillips to the inquiry, you're Andrew Phillips. You've got a master's degree in planning and urban planning from the University of Sheffield. You've been a town planner since 2008, and you're also a chartered member of the RTPI. Is that right?
That is correct.
And you're the planning officer in the case.
Yes.
Have you got your proof of evidence in front of you?
Yes,
And do you adopt that as your evidence to the inquiry?
I do.
Excellent. 6 points. Firstly, can we take up I5, the Oxfordshire decision? Is that I5? Yes. How does this decision help the inspector in arriving at a judgment as to how much weight should be given to the need for this form of residential development?
Thank you. So if we're going through the care elements, which this Secretary of State decision does cover, I will go through it bit by bit and just stop me if I'm going too fast or too slow. The first bits to note, paragraphs obviously 3 and 4, where the inspector recommends the appeal is dismissed, and then the Secretary of State agreed with that decision. If we then go to paragraph 28, which is on page 5, the Secretary of State is saying that he agrees that only significant weight should be given to provision of extra care for old people's housing or older people's housing. And then if we move to paragraph 74 and 75,
Yes, I think that's in the corresponding appeal decision rather than the Secretary of
Yes,
State report.
yeah.
Is that correct? Yes.
yeah, sorry, I didn't make that clear. And this is where the inspector was showing how the calculations were done for the need for older people's homes. Under paragraph 74, 74, which is on page 35 of the inspector's report. And then on paragraph 77, which is how it translates to South Oxfordshire, it was stating the need for extra care units was 964 units, which is quite a lot higher than what we need. And as was said this morning, the need is either 352 or 369. So here the inspector inspector and Secretary of State has said significant weight, which would agree with what I put as my weighting, which can be seen in the statement of common ground on page 22 under the benefits and weighting. And also obviously our need is a lot lower than the 964 extra care units presented there. So that's how it relates to care elements.
Anything else about this decision letter?
If you go in regards to housing and need, first go back to the Secretary of State decision, which is paragraph 25. And that states that the inspector found only moderate weight to be given to the additional housing. Whereas the Secretary of State is basically saying because of the housing shortfall, significant weight should be granted. In my statement of common ground with the appellant, for instance, release of market homes, I gave significant weight. However, the Secretary of State could be showing here that given that this council can provide easily a 5-year housing supply, we're around 7. Then maybe it should have been more likely moderate weight should have been given to that in line with the inspector for that Oxfordshire appeal.
In Oxfordshire, did the council have a 5-year supply?
No, the council didn't have a 5-year land supply there. It had at best 4.2 years as stated in paragraph 25.
But are you changing your position or?
Well, I'm saying the seems to be the Secretary of State is disagreeing with the weighting I gave. So obviously it's up to you as a decision maker to put your own weight onto elements. I'm just highlighting that while I gave significant weight to it, the Secretary of State is seemingly saying it shouldn't be given that sort of weight in decision-making process.
Okay, but just so I'm clear, I understand the caveat that it's my decision, but what is your position? Could I just ask that, please?
It appears that I may have overweighted that element and I shouldn't have given it significant weight. I should have only given it moderate weight. And that seems, and based on the latest evidence of this Secretary of State decision, I've overweighted that benefit.
Okay.
Anything else on this decision letter? Mr. Phillips.
Yes, the last bit in regards to specialist older people's housing. So I just go back there under paragraph 361 on page 107. It's just to show the last sentence where both main parties agreed significant weight should be given to the extra care housing and not substantial weight.
Anything else on that?
I believe that is everything on that Secretary of State decision.
Fine. Second point is affordable housing, and the inspector will remember in opening, I said that the extent of the shortfall had considerably improved since the last appeal. If we take up the previous inspector's decision letter, I have it at your appendix 2. And if we turn to internal paragraphs 58 and 59. The inspector characterises the extent of the shortfall in those paragraphs and gives substantial positive weight to the affordable housing provision. My question to you is, by reference to the AMR, and the note which you append at Appendix 4, why do you say that the affordable housing position has improved considerably in the last 18 months?
So yes, so since that appeal decision, the council has provided, do you want to go through the evidence first or the points first?
Whichever's easier for yourself.
Okay, so in 2020, which is in the my appendix, which is the briefing note from Richard Kane.
Appendix 4.
Appendix 4. In 2020, it said the need for affordable housing was 561 dwellings. Then if we move to the AMR, which is document I4. And which in the last table in that document has figures from 2021 to 2022, which is 154 affordable houses was built, which is a significant increase from the previous years. The previous year, 2020 to 2021, we only provided 57. So it's a significant increase in the affordable housing this council is providing. And then on 2022 to 2023, the affordable housing was increased to 181 dwellings. And if my calculation is correct, that means additional 335 affordable houses has been provided in the sort of period and time we're discussing, which is a large increase in affordable housing provision.
So are you saying that the need has dropped from 561 to 335?
No, sorry, the need in 2020 was 561 affordable dwellings. What has been provided, if I've done the 154 plus 181 correctly, is 335 affordable dwellings, which is a large proportion of that need.
Anything else you want to say about affordable housing?
I think that covers the affordable housing elements, unless there's any more specific question.
Third point, the single issue review, and the inspector had time to read it. My question goes to what the implications are for this appeal and how much weight the inspector gives to growth 2. If we take up the inspector's decision, and it's paragraph 56.
Yep.
And we can see that the inspector records that the parties agreed that growth 1 was out of date, and that the inspector gave limited weight, this is at the end of paragraph 56, limited weight to the conflict with growth 2.
That's correct.
Assuming that the single issue review is adopted tomorrow evening, how does this change that calculation?
If it was adopted tomorrow afternoon at full council, that would mean growth 1 and growth 2 would have full weight. And therefore any conflict with growth 2 or growth 1 should be given that same weighting, full weight against. If it's not direct the question from you, so I'm not sure if I should add it, but again, house 6, which is how you locate extra care facilities, is linked to growth 2.
And why is that?
Growth 2 has some exceptions to what you can build in the countryside, and one of those is policy house 6. So anything that doesn't comply with policy house 6 does not therefore comply with growth 2. And I can take further if desirable.
I don't need you to necessarily take me any further. I've got the policies in front of me, so it's your evidence, so it's up to you.
The first thing the inspector needs to do is decide whether the appeal complies with or is contrary to the development plan as a whole. Can you take up Mr. Brown's proof of evidence? Does Mr. Brown offer an answer to that question?
Mr. Brown, I'll have to try and find it, but he does identify conflict with the adopted local plan. In policy, I know it's in one of these, but certainly within policy ENV1, which is paragraph, or is it ENV2, where it identifies that the proposal does not comply.
Different question. The inspector has to reach an overall judgment whether the appeal complies with or offends the development plan as a whole.
Yeah.
Does Mr. Brown answer that question?
Not that I've seen.
What's your answer? In your view, does the appeal offend or comply with the development plan as a whole?
It offends the local plan as a whole.
And why do you say that?
Because proposal doesn't strictly comply with policies ENV1, ENV2. Obviously, there's harm to the green belt, which we'll come on to later, I'm sure. It doesn't comply with House 6 because it has harm to the landscape and visual character of the area. And therefore are several elements where this policy goes against. And that's why my recommendation, I've concluded how the proposal fundamentally goes against local plan, and that formed the reasons for refusal, or my recommended reasons for refusal.
Penultimate point, the heritage issues. The inspector has drawn to the party's attention that notwithstanding the concession in the statement of common ground about ENV 11 and ENV 12, he's drawn attention as to whether, upon reflection, that's right. Can we take up those two policies so you can give your views? So ENV 1's the conservation area policy.
ENV 11.
What I saw
Yeah.
ENV 11, yeah.
Yeah, so the proposal is affecting the conservation area. Partly it's difficult to give a final definite answer on this because obviously it's an outline consent, and to fully comply with ENV 11, it has to be of a high standard and includes materials. And there's other elements in policy ENV 11 there. So strictly speaking, this proposal doesn't comply with policy ENV 11 because you cannot determine if the proposal is of a high standard in design.
But are you saying it offends ENV 11? Or are you saying we don't know at this stage?
It would offend ENV 11 as we don't know it would meet policy ENV 11.
And ENV 12, the listed buildings policy.
ENV 12 states that any proposal affecting heritage assets like listed buildings will not be permitted if it have a detrimental impact. This proposal obviously does impact on heritage, and therefore this policy it wouldn't comply with.
So why did you agree a statement of common ground which said there was no that was compliance when you're now saying there is not compliance?
Well, policy ENV 12 goes part way. You then go to the MPPF, which goes from no harm, less than substantial harm to substantial harm. And this proposal, in my view, causes the less than substantial harm. And that's the conservation of listed buildings. And therefore, that's why in the statement of common ground, it's been weighted accordingly, as it will cause less than substantial harm.
And then final question is the overall planning balance. Everyone knows that the inspector has to get his metaphorical weighing scales out, put all the harms on one side, the benefits on the other. And if the benefits clearly outweigh the harms, then planning permission should be granted. How do you approach, or how would you invite the inspector to approach that final overall planning balance?
In the overall planning balance, I would say at best it could be argued that the proposal have substantial benefits. That is at best. However, there is also clearly substantial harm being proposed. And in accordance with MPPF paragraph 148, the national policy requires benefits to clearly outweigh said harm. And in my view, the proposal does not meet that test.
Is there anything else you'd like to say about that? Or not?
Nothing else specific unless you want me to go through all the individual harms and benefits, but I think
No,
that is what's in the statement of common ground, so I don't think that'd be useful to inspect unless he wants me to go through it.
Thank you. If you wait there, my learned friend will have some questions for you.
Thank you. I don't have any questions at this stage.
Thank you, sir. In that case, could I just start with a very simple proposition, which I think we can agree between us, that there's one simple policy test to be applied here, which is, do the scheme benefits clearly outweigh the scheme harms? If they do, permission should be granted.
Yes, that would be correct.
Good. And just going back to a point about development plan compliance as a whole, if the scheme benefits would clearly outweigh the scheme harms, then the right conclusion to reach would be that the scheme complies with the development plan as a whole, because in those circumstances, the development plan would be telling you to grant planning permission.
That, I understand where you're coming from.
Good.
The only caveat I would give is obviously you can, in any local plan process, obviously it has policies that you're meant to meet. However, it obviously does allow for departures in order to do the overall planning balance as such.
Yeah. Well, let's look at that again. If we get to the position where the benefits clearly outweigh the harms, the development plan would be telling you, grant permission for this scheme, wouldn't it? That's the answer that you would get going through the development plan. The end product would be grant permission. Obviously.
Yes, I'm just, yeah.
Okay.
You're coming to, I understand where you're coming from.
Good.
It's obviously a bit more nuanced than a
Well,
simple yes or no.
well, no, in that instance, it isn't actually. Let's be absolutely clear. If on a proper balancing, looking at everything together, the benefits outweighed the harm, the development plan would be telling you grant permission. Yeah.
The local plan is obviously only one policy document in the, obviously there's the MPPF as well. There's
Yeah. No, I'm just looking at the development plan at the moment.
Yeah.
And just, I'll put it again. If the benefits clearly outweighed the harm, and you know, after the local plan, what's the right thing to do in those circumstances? The development plan would tell you grant permission, wouldn't it?
Development plan would, it would, it's where you come into applying professional judgment balancing, because obviously you can go against one element of the plan, but you look at the plan as a whole.
Yeah. Looking at
And therefore the benefits would outweigh, if
Yeah.
benefits outweigh the harm, you would say that it would be right to approve the application.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. We agree with each other.
Yeah.
And applying the plan as a whole in that way, the answer would be grant permission, because in those circumstances, the scheme would accord with the development plan as a whole. It may knock some policies sideways. It may drive a coach and horses through something else,
Yeah.
but on balance, looking at the round, development plan would say grant permission, because as a whole,
Yeah.
the scheme accords to the plan. Agreed?
Yes.
Good. Lovely. All right. So I just want to start with some questions on the need. The council accepts that the need for private extra care, just that bit we're looking at, private extra care in the district, is now, today, acute.
Yes, that there's a need for 369 extra care units required.
Well, let's look at now, and then we'll come to in a few years' time. But in the statement of common ground on need, there's a table at the back, isn't there? On the second page, paragraph 12.
I haven't got the one in front of me.
Sorry, no rush to take, if you could grab a copy.
Is it in the core documents in that?
Yes, it will be. Can I shout out the number?
Could you help with the core document?
So. Here we go.
It is CD 5.4.
Thanks ever so much.
Okay. Yes, in front of me, thank you.
Thanks so much. And if you turn to the second page, there's paragraph 12, and there's a table at the end of it, which is taken from the needs evidence in short, as we saw this morning.
Yes,
And that's common ground. What that table tells us is all common ground because it's in the common ground statement and
That's
it's
correct.
signed by you. Didn't you? I know you rode back on a couple of points on some others, but you're absolutely not rowing back on anything in this, are you?
no, that this is the needs.
Great. Okay, so this table's totally agreed. And just the reason I said now is because the second part of the table, can you see there's a second heading, net need for private housing care units, medium to long term? And
Yes.
under 2023, in the ECDC local authority area, there are figures for 2023, which are north of 300 now. And that is why it's right to say that the needs now are acute. Yeah.
Yes, the need is 369, 336 in 2023.
Yeah, and we agree that that is an acute need for further extra care housing now, don't we?
Yes,
Good. And that increases as per the agreed figures to 2026, yet further to just shy of 370 on the 2011 census data, which Mrs. Venables tells us is the one to use in terms of the data.
sorry, which year was that, sorry?
2026,
2026, you said over 370.
just shy of 370, 369.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it's getting worse. Yeah. Agreed?
Yes, the number is increasing.
Okay. And that is the need taking into account existing provision. So there's only one private extra care scheme in the district. That's the one at Ely with 57 units. That number we've been looking at, those numbers we've just been looking at, take account of that, as in you need, and now you still need another 300 and something, growing to a bit more in 2026. Yeah.
Yes.
Good. All right. Okay, so it's common ground between us that by 2026, just looking at that date, the council needs to find another 369 private housing with care units to meet the need in the district.
Yes, under the 2011 census, it's 369.
That's common ground. And that the reason we're going to 2026, I'm sure you understand, that's a critical date here, isn't it? Because that's not only are the needs even more acute then, but that's the date when the appeal scheme can come on stream and start delivering. So it's a really important date to look at, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously, if the reserve matters gets approved and when it comes forward and all that type of things, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. And just stepping away from that for a moment, just to be absolutely clear between us, those numbers we've just been looking at, the 330, the 360, they are private extra care need. They don't tell us anything, do they, about affordable extra care need. That's a different tranche of need outside the scope of this inquiry.
Yes, the figures put here is net need for private extra care.
Thank you very much indeed. So it tells us nothing about the lump of additional need for affordable extra care, not private, which exists in the district.
I don't have the figures in front of me, but this is just figures for the private extra care.
Absolutely. Just want to be absolutely clear. Okay. So, at the other end of the scale, those numbers tell us nothing about the need for care homes either, does it?
Not on this table, no.
Yeah. And I just want to be absolutely clear between us. You're not suggesting, are you, that there's any scope to repurpose care homes to meet the identified extra care need? That's absolutely no part of your case or your evidence.
You mean existing care homes?
Yeah.
No, I'm not
Yeah,
arguing that.
good. All right. So it's a really, into looking at national policy, it's a really important government objective, isn't it? To meet or to ensure that a sufficient number and range of homes can be provided to meet the needs of present and future generations.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really important government objective, isn't it?
Yes, that's an additional question.
And actually, the government goes further, doesn't it, in the NPPG, and it tells us that providing for elderly, specialist elderly accommodation is critical. And you would agree that that applies equally here?
I should check the point, but I'll take your word if it's, yeah.
Of course. And assuming it is in the MPPG,
Yeah.
you would assume that it applies equally here in East Cambridgeshire as anywhere else. It's critical to meet this need here.
Yes, it is a national need. If it, as I, with caveat, it's in the MPPG.
Yeah,
Then
of
yes.
course. Okay. All right. So bearing in mind that really important government objective and bearing in mind that it's critical, it's identified as critical, it would be, let's use just plain terms, it would be totally unacceptable, wouldn't it, not to meet that objective in East District, in this district. It would be totally unacceptable not to meet that objective.
The council should work towards meeting that objective.
Yeah, and it would be totally unacceptable, wouldn't it, for it not to meet that need?
It should do everything it can to meet that need.
Okay. Of course, it needs to do everything it can. And if that need were to, if that objective wasn't met and that need wasn't met, that would not be an acceptable situation, would it?
If obviously timeframes and all that sort of thing, but if it was never meeting that need over a long period of time, that would be a bad state of affairs.
Okay, well, let's look at it in really simple layman's terms. As things stand, there is a need for more than 300 more private extra care units. That need is not being met, and that's an unacceptable situation, isn't it?
It's a significant problem that council needs to meet.
Mr. Phillips, please answer the question. It's not an acceptable situation, is it?
No, I'd say it's not an acceptable situation.
Okay, not an acceptable situation.
Just as some guides, answer the question, but you can qualify your answer.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay. And you tell us that the council is doing everything it can. One thing we know is that the council's local plan has no allocations to deliver extra care housing, whether affordable or private, does it?
No site-specific allocations.
No. And you're not aware of any allocations for any other type of use that have been flipped to extra care, are you? There aren't any.
You mean an application currently to change it from housing to C2? No, I'm not aware of any.
No, no.
There are current planning applications.
Yeah, and that's across the entire plan period. No one's ever done that. No one said, I've got a scheme for C3. Do you know what I want to do? I want to not use that allocation. I want to do it for C2 instead. People just don't do that, do they? On the evidence.
I couldn't answer that question because obviously you do sometimes, and I know from experience, you sometimes have the large mansion sort of thing, which gets turned into a care home. So you do sometimes go from C3 to C2.
Oh, I see that. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Extra care. No one. It's a matter of fact, isn't it? We've only got one in, and it's the 57 unit at Ely. No one has done that over the entire plan period. Taken an allocation for something else and said, I don't want to do that. I want to do it for extra care.
No, I'm not aware of any additional ones.
Okay. And what that means is that the council is entirely dependent on the market to come forward, as in individual private developers to come forward and to deliver schemes to meet this critical need. Yeah.
Yes, this would become forward through planning applications, which are based on people buying and selling land and planning application.
Exactly. And we know that the local plan was adopted in 2015, and the plan period is 2011 through to 2031, isn't it?
I can double check that. That sounds right.
Yeah, that's broad parameters. It doesn't really matter in truth.
Local plan covers the period up to 2031. Yes.
Yeah, okay. We know, as we've discussed before, there is only one private extra scheme, the Ely scheme, in the entirety of the district. That's the only one that's come forward over the entirety of the plan period.
That's the only one that's come forward from application and built.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want me to carry out, because obviously we've got the Liverpool free scheme, but we've already dealt with that's pre-application, not planning application.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking at what the market has delivered over, let's say, the last decade or so, back to the 2011 or so. And the only scheme that the market has delivered over that period is the 57 unit scheme at Ely.
There have been other care C2 providers provided in that period. which is like North Ely, for instance.
Yeah.
So it's, so just
Care
clarify,
homes and the like, do you mean?
yes, so it's not
Yeah.
the extra care
No.
retirement village.
Okay.
That is it too.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
I just want to be, we're talking obviously, if I may say so, about private extra care.
Yeah.
And we've established that critical need for the 300 plus units. And what we're just establishing as a matter of fact between us is that the council's dependent on the market to come forward. And what has happened as a matter of fact over the last decade or so, the market has delivered one scheme of private extra care in the district, and it's the 57 unit scheme at Ely. Correct?
That's correct in the sort of, which is comparable to the Bottisham appeal in that sense. So I can't tell, I don't know for definite all additional how the other C2s has come forward, but none would be of that sort of retirement integrated care village.
Sorry, there is one private extra care scheme in the district.
The Roslyn Court is the only one I know is definitely would meet that test.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. That's the only one that's in front of the inquiry. Okay, and so we can agree, can't we, that given there is currently a critical need, this 300 plus unit scheme, which is going to grow more, and given that the council is entirely dependent on the market to deliver, and given that the market over a decade has delivered less than 60 units, we can agree, can't we, between us, that this area is an area of sustained market failure.
I don't want to use the word failure because obviously that has our own, but yes, I would agree the market has only provided that one unit, one site.
It's clearly, I mean, we're not beating around the bush. It's clearly market failure, isn't it? There's a very clear need. The market hasn't got anywhere near meeting that need. It is clearly an area where the market has failed, isn't it?
The market has failed to deliver 369 units.
And so we can just capture that in everyday language that someone would use when they're discussing the situation as an area of obvious market failure, isn't it?
I'd say the market has failed to provide the 369 units. Again, market failure might have other connotations, but yes, the market has not provided sufficient extra care units.
I really don't want to go, and especially with the inspector having intervened a moment ago, to have to ask the question a third time.
Yeah.
Are you seriously suggesting that this is not an area of sustained market failure?
If pushed, I'd say that this is a market failure.
Thank you very much indeed. I did push you 3 times, and I'm
Yeah.
glad you've agreed. Okay, so sustained market failure. And actually, I just want to pick up on one reason for that. We're agreed that's that's the situation we're in. But part of the reason for that is because, as Mr. Brown's evidence explains at length, C2 developers, people who might be in the market, who might want to deliver this sort of thing, can't compete on the open market with C3 developers. And that's all in Mr. Brown's evidence. And you don't look to challenge that or go behind that, do you?
I don't know the sort of difference in prices between C2 and C3 buying, so I think that would be beyond my ability to answer a direct question.
Totally accept that.
Yeah.
But of course, the way this works is we put in evidence, and if the council wants to challenge it, it needs to do that. You're not challenging Mr. Brown's evidence on those points.
I wouldn't be able to challenge. I don't have the professional expertise to say
Absolutely.
how you buy and sell land.
Okay, so just to draw those points together then, so there's absolutely no doubt between us. It's common ground. We agree each other that there is an acute existing need for private extra care, and that is a growing need. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. It's critical to meet that need.
Yes.
Yeah. The government is failing, sorry, not the government, the council is failing to meet those needs.
Yes, the council's not been able to do that, yes.
Yeah. Which brings it into conflict with critical government guidance, the MPPF telling us to make sure that sufficient houses are brought forward to meet that range of needs across the generations. The council is failing to meet that critical government guidance.
Yeah, the council, again, council's not yet providing that.
Yeah,
need.
it's not yet.
Yeah.
And so at the moment, it's
Yeah.
failed to do so. Let's please not beat around the word. If it's
Yeah.
an obvious, yes,
Yes.
let's have it. The council's failed to meet those critical government guidance. And we just look at it in terms in the MPPF. So I'm just going to grab it up. I'm sure you won't need to turn this, but but paragraph 8B, it's the same point I made before in truth, but 8B, the social objective to support strong, vibrant, healthy communities by ensuring a sufficient number and range of homes can be provided to meet the needs of present and future generations. Council is currently failing on that test.
The council, just a caveat to it, the council is not providing enough extra care units. So
Yeah, yeah.
there's many other housing types the council
Oh,
is providing.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting across every part of
Yeah.
the housing spectrum. But in the one we're talking about here, it's clear, isn't it, that the council has failed to meet that critical government objective.
Insofar as the C2 extra care parts, yeah.
Yes, okay, so that's what we are talking about, and it's common ground between us that the council is failing to meet that objective. And scrolling through to paragraph 60, it's a very, very similar point, but I just want to make sure there's no kind of wriggle room between us.
Paragraph 60, did you say?
60, please, yes. Delivering sufficient supply of homes. To support the government's objective of significantly boosting the supply of homes, it's important that the sufficient amount and variety of land can come forward where it's needed, that the needs of groups with specific housing requirements are addressed. And it's common ground between us that the council is failing to ensure that, in this case, the people with specific housing requirements for private extra care, their needs are not being met in this borough.
Yes, again, the carry of the extra care part to it.
Thank you. And then, in terms of the plan process, we'll come through to speculative applications in a moment. In terms of the plan process, there's no short to medium prospect of that being sorted through the plan process. That's not coming forward. No reviews coming forward, no new allocations coming forward in the foreseeable.
The only review that's come forward is obviously this English review.
Yeah, so I'm right that there's no short to medium term prospect of the local plan suddenly saying here are some allocations for private extra care. That's a long way off if it ever.
The council hasn't started a local plan process.
Okay, and the council is therefore, as we've agreed, reliant wholly on the market. And as we've agreed, this is an area of sustained market failure. All agreed?
Yes.
Good, okay. Thank you. Then just picking up on affordable housing, and in particular, I wanted to understand some of the points you made in evidence in chief. We can go to the documents if we need to, of course. I wonder if we can get the headlines. The council's latest analysis is that it needs to deliver 215 affordable housing units every year going forward through the plan period. Is that right?
Well, the need calculating, I've got to be careful because I'm not a policy planner, so just be careful
No,
when
of
I'm
course,
answering the
yeah.
question. Let's go through again. In 2020, the need was identified for 561 dwellings.
Okay.
And then, as I said, the council have provided 335 affordable housing in the past couple of years.
Okay. Let's go to the documents just to make sure we're not cross purposes. I think we might be. Core document 4.33 is the GL Hearn analysis.
Do I need that in front?
You may as well, I think, just to make sure we're not getting confused. So core document 4.33. Sorry, 4.33.
Sorry, so the folder exploded on me, so but I've got it here.
Okay. So in that document, if you come to internal page 112 of 320, but in actually, yeah, and in the PDF version, it's 112 as well.
112, page 112, yeah.
Okay, and have you got table 37 at the top of that?
I do.
Yeah. We've got there, it says estimated annual need for social affordable rent housing by local authority. And East Cams, it gives us a figure of 215.
Net need, yes, it says 215.
Okay, and so that was the basis of the question I put to you. Correct me if I'm wrong. We'll find the right figure if I've got the wrong one, obviously. But I'd understood that the council's latest approach was that to meet needs going forward, it needs to deliver 215 a year. Is that right or wrong?
So from what I've been told by the policy planner, again, I don't want to step beyond my remit and understanding, is we are providing substantially more affordable housing in the past few years, and that is cutting down on our need.
Right.
And which is why I was very careful because, which I think is what potentially you're going to lead on to. I
Well,
don't go too far.
let's stick with the question, the
Yeah.
simple question at the moment. You give me the number, just so I'm not misleading you in any way.
Yeah.
What number do you say the council has given itself to meet in terms of affordable housing each year going forward?
And that's what I say. Got to be careful because there's a much more complicated calculation that you do with forward on need. So just because we provided the 335 houses since 2021, that doesn't just mean you minus that off the 561 figure. It's a bit more of a calculated balance, and I can't give you that figure to say what the current need is.
Right. I'm just a little bit concerned in that you seem to have given a weighting to the amount of affordable housing our scheme will deliver without, as I understand it, knowing what figure the council has given itself to deliver in terms of its ongoing needs. Do you need a few minutes just to kind of have a look at the note from the your colleague and just get your bearings in terms of what the affordable housing position is in the district? I'm
Well-
very happy. We have got plenty of time. So if you'd like that, please do take it.
If you want me to go and check the actual, I need to go and speak to the policy planner. What I was saying, and again, is that the need identified in 2020 was 561. And you'll notice if you go to that email note from Richard Kay, our policy planner, the need in 2010, 2011 was 1,917.
Yeah.
Well, by the time the local plan was about, that was 1,561. And in 2020, it's 561. So that was, so in the 6 years, we reduced it by 1,000 dwellings, the actual need. Since the 2020, the council has provided a substantial more affordable housing, which is the 154 in 2021, 2022. And then 2023 to 2023, it's 181 units. So what I was trying to come to in my statement of common ground side things, given the area we live in, you're always going to have a significant need for affordable housing in this district.
Yes.
And I think it's also covered by the English review. I forgot that in the main documents, where the inspector basically says
This is the inspectors.
this is the inspector's report on the examination.
And which call documents?
CD 3.4 I've got in front of me. I don't know if it was given a different.
I think
size.
this might be inquiry document 1, I think.
I wonder if this is a way just to get to the point I'm trying to get to, which is what's the number? We can talk about what's happened and how it's changed over time. In the statement of common ground at paragraph 539, it says that in relation to future need arising, the SHMA identifies a net need of 215 affordable units per annum between 2020 and 2040. That was the point I was putting to you. It's the point I'd got from the note that your colleague had given to you at your appendix 3, and it's the point I'd got from that table in the SHMA. But if I've got the wrong number, let me know.
I would take, I note the number in there, that is 251 affordable units, yeah.
215.
Yeah, 215.
Okay.
Yeah, so can I just clarify this point? This is an agreed, this is in the statement of common ground.
Yeah,
Is this
yeah.
in paragraph, I'm just reading now, 5.39?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, that's the 215, that's fine.
Great. So actually, yeah.
Yeah.
The number I put to you is the number we're all working from, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then can we go to CD 4.34, which is, I think, I just, forgive me whilst I scroll through, I'll get the title for you.
That's our interim report.
That's right. That's your interim AMR, isn't it?
That's correct.
And in that, on page 4 of 4, there's a table 3,
That's correct.
affordable housing completions, gross. And what we can see is the number across actually the entirety of the last decade or so. I think that's the planned period, isn't it, 2011 through onwards. We can see the number of units that have been delivered.
That's correct.
Yeah. And we absolutely take your point that there's been an uptick in 2021, 22 and 22, 23. We can see that from the numbers. But what we can also agree is that that is still falling short of the number that the SHMA establishes as the net need going forward, which is the 215.
Yes, both those numbers are below the 215. The only thing I would add is obviously in Richard Kay's evidence documents, obviously it goes back to the 2011 date. And obviously when we're providing less affordable housing per year,
Yeah,
we were still reducing the need elements, obviously once. So why I take the point that we are providing less than 215 affordable dwellings per year, the actual need is still dropping quite substantially.
well, you're making inroads into your backlog, are you saying? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, the backlog is going down.
Right. So tell me, what was the backlog at the start of 2020?
2020, the backlog was 361 affordable dwellings.
Yeah.
And then that's where we're coming together, I think, is we then provided the 335 affordable housing to
Yeah,
reduce that.
But against a need to provide 215 in each of those subsequent years.
Yeah, and I accept the point, and that's why I'm saying back again, while the backlog is being cut down, there's always going to be a significant need for affordable housing in this part of the country.
Right. Okay. But what we can be absolutely, I'll try and make sense of those numbers in closings, but what we can be absolutely clear is that the council's delivery record has been way below where it needed to be to meet the needs of the district's residents over the last 10 years.
It's certainly below the 215. I would only point out that again, since 2021, the number has gone substantially up in the amount of affordable housing this council is providing.
Sorry, and just an answer to the question.
Yeah.
This has been over the last decade or so a district in which the council has not at any time met the needs of
No.
affordable housing.
Yeah, to agree with you, it's never gone over that 215 number.
Well, whatever the number was at any part in the 10-year history, because the 215 kicked in 2 years ago, at any part over the last decade or so, the council has never met the needs, the affordable housing needs of the district, has it?
No, I don't think it has.
Yeah. And so we can agree that these are the needs of some of the most vulnerable people in our society.
Yes, people who are needing a home and can't afford a market dwelling.
Yeah. And we can agree that it is critical that those needs are met.
It's certainly important to meet those needs, yes. If you're asking for waiting, words like creative.
I'm not, I'm asking for just everyday language, try and capture the extent of the failure here. And that's the word I'm going to use. It's been an obvious, again, sustained market failure here, hasn't it? Because the needs of some of the most vulnerable people in our society, their needs are not being met.
Yes, there's still a shortfall in that meets that need.
So as with the failure to meet the needs for those who need private extra care, there has also been a sustained market failure in terms of meeting the needs of affordable housing, some of the most vulnerable people in our society.
The affordable housing figures are on the short, definitely on the short side.
Yeah, I know they're on the short side. Let's please, it's a really straightforward question. This has obviously been a very sustained period of market failure, hasn't it?
The market has not brought enough affordable housing to the,
Okay, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Another sustained period, I'll put it to you, very sustained period of market failure. Okay, thank you. Why in those circumstances, why on earth in those circumstances wouldn't you give it substantial weight in the planning balance? Very sustained period of market failure, the council never having got close to meeting its needs of some of the most vulnerable in society. And here's a scheme that comes along. Why wouldn't you give that top end weight?
I have given it obviously significant weight, so that's obviously a lot of weight being given to it. my view is, given that the council is now providing substantially more affordable housing in the last few years, that is a significant improvement.
Right.
And therefore, to go to the substantial weight, I don't think it has met that test.
Okay, all right. So, well, I'll make submissions on that, and the inspector can form his own mind as to whether that is a sustainable position. All right. So, sorry for the jumping around, but I just wanted to pick up on going back to the private extra care, and as I said, the sites that we've been talking about coming forward, not the allocations which aren't being flipped, but the prospect of this need for 370 odd units, or whatever it is, 369 units coming forward by 2026, that critical time period we're talking about. It's clear from Mr. Smythe's helpful intervention yesterday that we're now only talking about 5 of the sites that were tabled in document I6. And just to be clear, that was sites 2, 4, 5, 11 and 14.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, okay. So stop me if I'm not being helpful, but I do need to ask some questions on this, and I'll be as quick as I can. Sites 4 and 5 are both outside the district.
That's correct.
Yeah. So it isn't really open to you, is it, to say that building on those sites are going to meet the district's needs? They don't count. You can't point to a site over there and say our needs have changed.
The argument, and again, I'll go in a bit slight caveat, as you can imagine.
Yeah,
It
give-
depends
give-
exactly
give-
where the location is, because the market need and where people will travel to go and get the extra care.
Give me a yes
Is-
or no first. Are you seriously putting forward those sites, those ones that are outside the district, as sites that are meeting the district's need of 360, 370?
That they wouldn't be the ones I would put most weight on in order to meet
No, that's
their
great.
needs.
But would you put a third time? Sorry,
Yeah.
you know the question. You're not seriously relying on those to meet that need, are you?
The ones I'd be, no, the ones I'd be
No.
putting the most weight on would be the other sites.
Okay, so can I just be absolutely, you're not relying on sites 4 and 5 going forward?
4 and 5 are outside the districts. They wouldn't be meeting our very much specific needs.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a market need and a district need.
Thank you.
And some of
Okay,
that is
so
crossover.
can I just pause there so I don't get lost in terms of exactly which sites we're talking about? So this is sites 4 and 5 as listed in I6.
Yes.
So those sites are
The ones I've got is North Cherry, Hinton, and North.
yes, North Cherry, Hinton and Northwest Cambridge.
Yes.
Yes, okay, that's helpful, thanks.
So we can, just again, let's be clear, straightforward. We can put a line through those in terms of you saying we've got sites that might come forward to meet the 369 as reasonable alternatives to the appeal side.
The need for district, yes, they wouldn't meet the specific needs of this district.
Thank
The
you.
market area, they would be meeting the need for.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the 369 is district.
District, yes.
And you're not putting forward those sites to meet that need.
They would not be meeting the specific this district
Thank you.
needs, yeah.
Good.
Okay, so if you can, it's really, I know it's difficult when you've been cross-examined, but try and answer the question and then qualify the answer. It just makes things move
Sorry.
more efficiently. No, that's
public
fine.
Inquiry.
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
Let's continue.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Site 14 is the last one I want to ask about, because site 14 is the land south of Grange Lane, Littleport.
That is correct.
And if I'm got my bearings right, this is the one where you can see from the last page of I6, which deals with this site. This is the one where Phil Grant, who's filled here, went out to make contact with Will Main at Manor Oak, and we got that email that's recorded in the text itself. The full email is at Annex I.
Do you want to grab the document?
It's up to you. We can if you want. I just wanted to see what the position is. You'll remember that email has a 2-page table setting out various timelines which take delivery of that site through to 2030. And I just wanted to understand, because I didn't hear it yesterday, you're not suggesting any of that is misconceived, misunderstood, wrong, unlikely, unreliable?
I'm not questioning Will Main and his timeframe. All I was saying to the inspector yesterday is obviously Carter Jonas have set up PPA in order to speed up that planning process, and developers paying money to make sure it's a quicker determination than normal.
Right, okay. So we might take a bit off the front of the planning application process. Let's hope that happens. Let's be absolutely clear, you're not suggesting that even with that, that's a site that's going to come forward anytime soon to mop up, for example, let's say the 2026 or the 2027 need. It's not going to come forward in that basis.
As I said yesterday, and I still believe you could get spades in the ground within the 5-year period, but obviously the dates you're giving obviously less than 5 years.
Yeah, so it's common ground between us that that site will not deliver units inside the 5 years. You might get a spade in the ground, but you're not going to get units occupied in that time frame.
It'd be doubtful you'll get units being provided in the 5 years.
Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah, so I agree with that.
Great, okay. So that's, so, and if that is the position, then obviously that's, let's assume that that's right. You're not not likely you're going to get site units coming on stream inside 5 years. Then it's obviously not a reasonable alternative to our site, is it? Because ours is coming on stream or could come on stream in 2026, inside 3 years, and this wouldn't come on stream even inside 5. It's not a reasonable alternative, is it?
I still believe it is a reasonable alternative. Because obviously you've got a large scheme that has been an area that has been around since the beginning of the local plan process. It's been a broad area of growth since 2015.
Yeah.
If we're just taking the 5 years, the set time frame, this current site, the appeal site, has failed to meet that test. It's a more than 5 year period.
Yeah.
And it hasn't even got on for its reserved matters stage yet. So Liverpool 3 could come forward in the 5 year period. It would meet a substantial amount of the shortfall because it's around 200 units according to Will Main.
So I'm so sorry. I thought we just established only a second ago that that is not a site that is likely to get more than a spade in the ground inside 5 years.
Sorry, approved in the 5 year time frame, outline reserved matters.
Spade in the ground in 5 years.
Actually, in construction terms, yes, spade in the ground within 5.
And it's common ground between us that it won't be. There's no proper basis on which to assume it will deliver units in which people can live inside 5 years. Yes?
Yes.
Good. Okay. On that basis, that being common ground between us, we're not going back against that. That being the case, it's clearly not, for the purposes of this inquiry, a reasonable alternative, is it, to the appeal scheme, which can come on stream inside 3 and meet the existing and growing need. Obviously, it's not.
If the appeal scheme is allowed, obviously this site would come forward quicker than Liverpool 3 could.
Yeah.
However, the point I'm trying to make, and Inspector, if it's
No, I understand the points being made. If you just try and answer the question, I don't really want to revisit the discussion we had yesterday, site specific from either side. So
I just wanted to see whether we could put a line through the site to help you, sir. I think we can, if we're being clear and reasonable about it. Because we know it's, we all agree it's not going to deliver any units inside 5 years. You can't say, well, hang on, that's a reasonable alternative to the appeal scheme, because if consented, that can come on inside 3 and inside even the longest time period anyone's spoken about in this inquiry, 5 years, Littleport won't be delivering. We know that. So it's not a reasonable alternative, is it?
I still believe it is a reasonable alternative. However, it's not a reasonable alternative if you take the strict 5 years element of it. What I'm saying is a reasonable alternative to deal with the need in the long term.
Right, okay, fine. It's a site that might, if it was consented and built out in some, in the 5 to 10 year window, it might meet the need that's existing then, but it will not meet, obviously, the need that exists now. Will be there in 2026 or will be there at the end of 2028. Agreed?
Certainly not 2026 and 2028. You might, as I said, you probably just got spade in the ground. So no, it won't be meeting that need by 2028.
yeah, I think got that point.
Thanks.
That's fine.
Yeah, I've mentally put a line through that side. Right. So can we agree that on the evidence before us, which is that sustained market failure in terms of private extra care delivery, and in the light of everything you now know about the possibility of other sites coming forward, the few that you are still looking at, site 2 and site 11, I think, there will remain a substantial shortfall, a substantial need for private extra care housing in 2026. And here's the important part, even with the appeal scheme operational. On the evidence, that's the right conclusion to reach, isn't it? That even with the appeal scheme in place and operational in 2026, there would be a substantial shortfall in terms of private extra care need.
So the needs, the number being provided, there isn't a specific number, so obviously I can't do a specific number. So obviously, but there would still be roughly, even at best, about 200 units shortfall if this was allowed and built out.
Yeah. And so we can agree, can't we, that if the inspector grants permission, even if the inspector grants permission for this scheme, in terms of need, as at 2026, will be acute and unacceptable. Even with the scheme in place, there will be an acute and unacceptable need for private extra care, won't there?
Again, I agree there'd be acute need still left. The only caveat I would put, and which is why I raised the Papers Way Oxfordshire appeal, because obviously their need was far greater at 900 units needed.
I'm not on waiting yet. I promise you I'll come to waiting in a minute. I just want to establish what will the real world situation be. No one goes out and thinking, oh, that's weighty.
Yeah.
What's the real world situation? With this scheme operational in 2026, there would still be on the right inclusion for the inspector to draw on the evidence before us now is that there would still be an acute and unacceptable need for private extra care.
There would still be an acute need, yes.
And that acute need would be, going back to the government objectives, the emphasis on the criticality of meeting that need that the government gives us, that would be an unacceptable situation even then, wouldn't it?
It would be a need that the council still needs to meet.
And look, we've done this for 5 or 6 times, but I've had to say, look, please, can we just use obvious language?
Yeah.
Third
Yes,
time, it would be an unacceptable situation even then, wouldn't it?
it would be an unacceptable situation.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay. And I just want to look at the reality of the situation as well in terms of when we had the last appeal decision. It's a point that's already been made. That came out on the 7th of April last year. And so
February.
got the wrong one?
Oh, no, sorry.
7th of April?
Yes,
The
sorry,
site
yes.
visit in
Yeah,
February.
yeah.
Yeah. And so another 18 months has slipped by. And despite the council's apparent optimism that it was likely that schemes would come forward, they never did. And we now know, in the light of your last answer, that on the evidence, the right answer to conclude now is that even if permission were given for this scheme and it were brought forward, there would be an acute and unacceptably unmet need for private extra care in 2026. Yep.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry, I thought that was
Sorry.
rhetorical. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Okay. Right. So we've been going an hour. It's taking me a bit of time. Now's a good time for a break if you wanted one second.
Yeah, shall we take a 10-minute break? We'll come back at past.
Yes. Sorry, I don't know the rules. Can I leave the table or?
Yeah, absolutely. Just don't talk to him.
Yes, you can leave the table. You're not bound to the table for the next 10 minutes. Don't worry. Okay, so we will adjourn. We'll return at 3. It's okay. I did actually adjourn before, but just to confirm, yeah, we're adjourning until 3:30. Thank you. Okay, are we all ready? Had a
I'm all good.
few
to go.
minutes to refresh. Just a reminder, I should have addressed this prior to cross-examination, and it applies equally to the appellant's witness. Again, just try and answer questions directly and then qualify your answer. The other point is you do have an advocate on your side as part of your party who can pick up any points in re-examination as well. So just note that point. If you'd like to continue.
Thank you, sir. So we were just finishing with the common ground that it would be, even with this appeal scheme in place and operational, there would be a critical and unacceptably unmet need for this sort of care in the district in 2026. So we'll move on from that now, please, to local plan policy. And for that, you'll need core document 3.1. And I just want to explore here the interaction between growth 2 and I think you called it housing 6, HOU 6. Yeah. And so if we look at growth 2 to start with, just to see how these two interplay. Sorry. And this is something you've drawn attention to in your proof. It talks about focusing the majority of development in Ely, Soham and Littleport, and then more limited development taking place in villages which have defined development envelopes, helping to support local services and the like. And then towards the bottom of that internal page 25, outside defined development envelopes, development will be strictly controlled, having due regard to the need to protect the countryside and setting towns and villages. And development will be restricted to the main categories listed below. And one of them, as you told us already, pointed out already in your evidence, is residential care homes policy HOU 6.
That's correct.
Okay. Before we go to HOU 6, can we agree that the reference there to residential care homes it's shorthand, isn't it? Because in fact, as we know, HOU 6 refers to residential, accommodation of different types. We'll look at it in detail, but it's not just care homes, is it?
Yes, it's more of this. Yes, it's more the C2 broad umbrella use.
Exactly. I just didn't want to have to toggle between the two. Okay, so there's growth 2 teeing up exceptions. And if we go through to HOU 6.
Yes, I'm there.
Thank you. This is headed residential care accommodation.
Sorry,
So-
do we have a page number?
So sorry, so this is
Scrolling
the-
through.
Yeah, CD 3.1, internal page 50, PDF 51.
Thank you.
So there's HOU 6. And as we've just established, this talks more broadly than just care homes. It's about residential care accommodation. And it says that that sort of accommodation will be located within a settlement that offers a range of services and social facilities. Design and scale of schemes should be appropriate to setting, no adverse impact on the character of locality, residential amenity. Applicants be expected to provide evidence of need for the provision. And then as an exception, proposals for care or nursing homes may be accepted on sites outside development envelopes where, and then we've got the 3 bullet points, and we'll come back to in a moment. I just wanted to understand from your evidence, in your evidence, you talk about the scheme's non-compliance in your view with the 3 bullet points. You say we've got a problem when we're assessed against those.
Yes,
Yeah.
the 3 bullet points for development outside the development envelope.
Yeah. There's a starting, just going back to before the 3 bullet points, it talks about proposals for care or nursing homes. Again, are you reading that as simply care homes or nursing homes being outside, or are you reading that as residential accommodation as per the heading in the policy?
I'm reading that as the residential care, so anything C2 related.
Okay, and just to flip the flip side of the same coin, if it didn't do that, it would mean that this council has no policies at all dealing with the provision of anything other than care and nursing homes outside of settlement boundaries.
Sorry, I might misunderstood the question. So, but yes, this policy relates to any sort of care in and outside these frameworks.
Okay, and so we therefore, on your approach, need to apply these 3 bullet points against our scheme.
Yes.
And if we meet them, we comply with HOU 6. And if we do that, we comply with growth two.
That's correct.
Flip side, of course, if we don't, we don't, but
Yes.
just so we know where we're going. Okay, so looking at the 3 bullet points. Site is located adjoining to or in close proximity to a settlement that offers a range of services and facilities, and there's good accessibility by foot cycle to those facilities. That's a tick for us, isn't it? That's in the statement of common ground.
Yes, the only caveat I would give is obviously it's a good range of services for a village, which is in the statement of common ground too.
Yeah, but you're not saying we breached that.
No.
Good. Okay, so that would be a tick. And then the proposal wouldn't cause harm to the character or setting of the settlement or the surrounding countryside. I just need to toggle back, please, to growth two. Before we do that, just look at the wording carefully. The proposal would not cause harm. Okay, so it doesn't allow for harm. If you go back to growth two. Sorry to be slow. Oh, God, can't do that. Growth two on the screen. Yeah, thank you. Just before the bullet point at the bottom of the first bullet point, you see it says development will be restricted to the main categories listed below, and one of them is the HOU6 category we're just looking at.
Yep.
And maybe permitted exception, provided there's no significant adverse impact. Now, to read those two policies consistently, presumably we would have to look at HOU6 as not saying you can't cause any harm whatsoever, but the policy must be to be read consistently. It mustn't cause significant adverse impact.
Nuanced answer going so disagreement potentially. So development will be restricted to, or I should say, you've got the growth two in front of you on page 25.
I do, yes, I
Yeah.
do have that.
Sorry, I just want to make sure. So development will be restricted to the main characters listed below, which is where we get house 6.
Yeah.
And may be permitted as an exception, provided there's no adverse impact. So 2 ways to read it is some interesting wording, let's say. So development will be restricted to the main character below, part 1 of that wording. And then may be permitted as an exception, provided there's no significant adverse impact on the character of the area.
Right,
It's like almost like
Oh, I
another
see.
point.
right. So you're looking for exceptions falling within the bullet points, and then there might be another one, which is if you can build something that has no impact whatsoever on the countryside.
Yeah,
And that's how you read that policy.
that's
Okay, fine. In that case, I won't, ultimately, as you know, the interpretation of policy is a matter of law, so I'll deal with it in closings. I just wanted to understand your approach. Going back to HOU6 then, your point is that any scheme that causes any harm to the countryside cannot be brought forward under the HOU6 exception.
yes, so house 6 basically says which is yes, I should say agreement.
Yeah.
Proposal would not cause harm to character or setting of the settlement or the
Yeah.
surrounding countryside, and that doesn't clarify the level of harm, it just says harm.
Yeah,
Obviously, again, caveats, as we agreed before, you have to look at things in more the rounds and if public benefits and harms and weigh it as any planning officer would. But to meet strictly with this policy, it would have to cause no harm.
okay.
And obviously both sides agreed to different levels, there is harm to the
I'm
character of the area.
just thinking about the sort of the credibility of that or as an approach. Can you really think of any care home or nursing home built in the countryside that won't have any impact on the countryside? Can you really conceive of such a scheme?
I would say disagree politely sort of thing. You said impact and harm are 2 different things.
Harm, sorry,
yeah.
harm, without harm the countryside,
Um,
really?
If you built something that was a beautiful design, for instance, even if you could see it and be in the countryside, that would be a positive benefit and wouldn't
Okay,
cause
yeah,
harm.
yeah, no, fair enough. All right, well, look, I'll deal with that in closing in terms of the interaction with growth 2. Let's come to the third bullet point though in HOU6 and got it. Third bullet, thank you, is there's an identified need for such provision that's unlikely to be met within the built up area. That's a tick, isn't it, on the basis of the evidence we've all agreed this morning?
Yes, I agree. And just to cover all the sort of sites we've been put forward, which are areas of disagreement, nearly all of those are outside village frameworks or in
Yeah,
countryside areas.
Yeah, and we know from the earlier answers that they're not going to deliver against our scheme in any event on your own analysis. Yeah.
Oh, we're going to, yeah,
Okay. All right.
detail on that one.
Fine. Then very briefly in terms of policy in ENV 11 and 12. Just I wanted to understand, because you've rolled back on those in terms of the statement of common ground. So we just need to understand what the position is now between us. And this is in terms of conservation areas. And it talks about being a high standard of design and the like. So this is on internal page 84. And ENV 12. We'll come back to them in a minute. ENV 11, that policy doesn't permit, does it? It doesn't have an internal balancing exercise that schemes that are harmful in conservation area terms can nonetheless be permitted by reference to public benefits, for example, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. And so to that extent, given that you're now alleging a breach of this policy, that insofar as there's a breach, it would have to be read in the light of the fact that this is inconsistent with the MPPF, not having that internal balancing exercise.
Yes, it would not be consistent with the MPPF in regards to that element.
Great. Okay. And then ENV 12, which is listed buildings. This does have, you can see, and the second proposals to extend, alter or change a listed building will only be permitted where they would do something. Then there's a few bullet points. Then there's another one. Proposals that affect the setting of a listed building will only be permitted where they would. And this is preserve or enhance or make a positive contribution, not materially harm or facilitate the long-term preservation. And so how does that fit with the balancing exercise that's mandated in the MPPF? Is that consistent with or inconsistent with in your view?
I would have to agree that it has an inconsistency, because obviously it doesn't mention wider public benefits.
Yeah, okay. All right. And so on any proper approach, I know we've got to go through development plan policies, but the right approach, as is set out in the statement of common ground on heritage, is to identify the harm in heritage terms, see whether it's outweighed by public benefits. If it is, that's a gateway through to the wider planning benefit versus planning harm analysis, capturing everything, in short, the very special circumstances test.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Good, thank you very much indeed. Then I wanted please to come to the benefits table in the statement of common ground. And sorry, is the harm and benefits table, I beg your pardon. It's at the end of the main statement of common ground.
Yes, I've got it on page 22.
Thanks so much. Okay. And just getting our bearings on this, we've got harms on one side and benefits on the other. And I just wanted to pick up one minor point to start with. You've got under harms something called potential moderate in relation to workforce.
That's correct.
And it's the word potential that I'm unsure about. I know you mentioned it previously today. Are you saying that that is a factor? We'll come back to what that factor is, but in very general terms, that's a factor that the inspector should weigh against the grant of planning permission, or one that, you know, it might be an issue, but it's not something that weighs significantly in the planning balance?
I think the inspector should consider it.
Yeah.
However, again, to caveat that, I'm trying to make very clear it's only a potential, not a definite. So when the inspector should consider it, the inspector should consider it as a potential, and it is raised by the county council in regards to care provision.
Yeah, no, we've seen where it's come from. I'm putting myself in the inspector's shoes. I feel a little bit unsure as to what I'm being told to do here. It's a potential something. Lots of things are potential, but we can deal with in terms of likelihoods. And you're not putting forward any evidence, are you, to support the assertion that comes from your side.
There's no evidence from my side,
So there's no evidence to support this point. Is that a fair?
not
conclusion?
from me individually.
No, okay. And as a planning officer, you know your role is to listen to various consultees, heritage, drainage, whoever. And in this case, it's the county council saying, look, we think we've got a problem here, but that's not something you professionally are prepared to put forward in front of this inquiry, saying, look, I think that is a problem that weighs against the grant of planning permission. That's not something you're saying.
That is correct. I'm not saying it's coming from me. I'm saying a specialist has said it. And even they say potential words to that effect.
Yeah, but I mean, they're not here and I can't answer them questions, but you are here. And
Yeah.
in your professional judgment, you're not, as I understand it, suggesting to the inspector that this is something that should weigh against the grant of planning permissions, correct?
I'm not saying it's not a definite sort of thing. That's why I've been trying to be very clear. All I can say is, given the expertise been provided to me by a specialist.
Yeah.
It's raised a concern, but it shouldn't be taken as read that this is definite. So again, when I was trying to do my balancing act, as I'm sure you will, sir, it's, the benefits of actually creating jobs versus any potential risk to the current care homes has been identified by the individual experts. It would be the same as if county council raised concerns over highway safety, for instance. I would take that with
Yeah. Well,
some
let's
weight.
use that as an example. So I promise I won't be more than I need to be on what looks like a small point. You have to listen to what your consultees are saying, but then it's your job, if I may say so, to say, well, look, I'm the person who draws this all together and I have to perform a professional view. The design officer is telling me this, heritage is telling me that, drainage is telling me this. And you have to weigh that all in the balance. And as I understand it, all you're saying is, well, someone else has said this, but you professionally are not putting forward any evidence to support it.
That's
And
correct.
it's not your professional view that this would happen, is it?
My professional view is I don't know if
Fine.
it would happen.
Okay, that's fine. And on the basis that you don't know it would happen, you couldn't really say to the inspector, look, weigh that against the scheme, could you? Because you don't know if it's going to happen.
I professionally don't know if it's going to happen.
And therefore come on, let's get through this.
Yeah.
It's not something the inspector, on your professional advice, it's not something the inspector should weigh against the grant of planning permission, is it?
Not just from my advice, I'm sure the inspector will, I don't speak for you, sir, but obviously there are constantly responses been received, which I'm sure
okay.
you've seen.
Yes, I already have the consultee
Yeah.
response. I think the question is, in your professional view, is this something that should weigh against the scheme when I formulate my decision? Obviously, I'll have the benefit of all the representations as well to take into account.
Okay, thank you. But let's pan out to economic benefits globally from this scheme. It's common ground between us that the economic benefits are positive, aren't they?
I presume we need to globally just for entirety, not worldwide sort of thing. But I would agree there are significant job creation benefits from the scheme.
Yeah, and insofar if there was any sort of inkling background concern in terms of impact on other employers locally, taken as a whole, this scheme will deliver employment benefits which weigh in favour of the grant of permission.
That's correct.
Okay, and so it wouldn't be right to identify this as a harm weighing against the grant of planning permission in this table, would it?
No, and I think in my proof, I gave it moderate weight in favour of the application. I'm saying the economic benefits would outweigh that potential.
Great,
Yeah,
we're agreed on that.
Yeah.
And so when we come to this table, actually, this isn't something that goes, even on your approach, in the harms category, because actually, taking everything together,
Yeah.
this scheme is positive in employment terms. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so that potential moderate, whatever that may have meant, can come out, can't it?
Sorry, that's an additional question. I was,
Yes.
yeah.
In this table,
yeah.
you said there's a potential moderate harm here. We're agreed that can come out of the table. can't it?
So yes, just to clarify, in my proof, obviously I said moderate economic benefits, and it was just that was the balancing act I had done to say if there was that potential, then the economic benefits should be moderate.
Yeah.
But no, it shouldn't weigh against the application. So, Inspector, you shouldn't put the economic impacts in the negative category. It just may be overall it's not as significant.
Yes. Okay, fine. Thank you. And then just to see where we were on accessibility before wrapping this all up. We spoke this morning about the revised plans and how with that pedestrian and cycle access coming out of the northwest corner, it'll be a little less, to use Mr. Smythe's phrase, attractive in that sense. But you're, as you very helpfully said, no objection to the scheme on that basis. I just wanted to pick up a point that comes out of the inspector's conclusion last time round. If you turn in the inspector's conclusion last time round to paragraph 7.8. Sorry, not 7.8.
Yes.
78. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, that confused me there for a
Yeah,
second.
sorry, my fault. You can see there the inspector giving moderate positive weight to the site's accessibility to services.
That's correct.
Yeah, and on the assumption that moderate's a broad category, you're not suggesting that the weight that should be given in this case with the link taken out drops out of moderate, are you, or does it fall into the next band below?
Given, again, making it first clear that I don't mean, as I said earlier, it doesn't make the scheme unacceptable. Obviously, it means that the scheme is slightly more divorced from the village because obviously less connections. So my professional view would be low to moderate.
Okay, low to moderate. And so we've got some weighting from you that needs to go in the planning balance in that respect. And can we just go back to that table and just be clear?
Statement on ground again.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
That is not of itself something that's identified in this table as a benefit of the scheme, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay, so we could just put in another line, which would be accessible to
sorry, just
services. And that
Correct myself. Obviously, one of the issues raised was how accessible the public owned space is to the wider village. And also, we said earlier that it will mean they have to go a slightly longer route for some people to get to the open
Yeah.
space.
But that's going the other way. The inspector's point is different, isn't it? It's the accessibility of the site to Bottisham.
Yeah.
Gave it some weight. You think it should be downgraded now to low to moderate, but that should go in this table as an additional benefit, shouldn't it?
Yes, if
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so then we come to the overall conclusion, and you were very clear in evidence in chief that the reason you thought, at that stage at least, the planning permission shouldn't be granted was because that simple policy test that we identified at the start, do the benefits clearly outweigh, you said wasn't met because, as you explained, you'd given substantial negative weighting to the harms and substantial weighting to the positives, such that in broad terms it was in balance, but not clearly outweighed benefits over harm. Is that a fair assessment?
yes, overall, I'd only clarify slightly that
Yeah.
obviously, I still believe the harms do slightly outweigh the benefits.
All right. Yeah. But on any analysis, on your approach, when you wrote this proof and drew up the statement on ground, it was pretty finely balanced, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And when you reached that pretty finely balanced conclusion, you were strongly of the view that the alternative site assessment work that my client had put together was, as Mr. Smythe said in opening, not worth the paper it was written on.
Yes, that I would say isn't robust.
Yeah, but that's that position's changed, hasn't it? Because we now know from your answers earlier that, as you said, on the evidence before us, we should now conclude that even with the appeal scheme in place in 2026, there would be an acute and unacceptable amount of need for this very sort of care. Yes?
Just had to clarify because obviously there's the acute need, which we established a bit earlier, but obviously it's then how you balance that and how you put that into your weightings and how you come to a weighting.
Well, let's come to that.
Yeah.
That's the agreed position. So we know that even with the appeal scheme in place, there will be an acute and unacceptable outstanding unmet need for this sort of care. And that really, what you were saying in your proof when you reach this finely balanced judgment, if we go to it, please.
In my proof.
in your
Yeah.
proof, yeah. If you go to your proof 3.17. Following this expert independent advice, that's the Gerald Eve report. Yeah,
Yes.
it's your professional view that this type of accommodation, so private extra care, can highly likely be accommodated elsewhere on land that's not within the green belt.
That is correct.
Well, we know from your answers already that there, on the evidence before this inquiry, the conclusion to reach is that there won't be sites coming forward to meet this critical need over the timescales we're talking about. Isn't it?
No, and I'll have to caveat this because obviously there's maybe a bit in between. So first of all, just to say, if, for instance, independent advice had come back and said it was a robust scheme, all that sort of things, my professional recommendation would have been one of approval,
We'll come
which
back
is
to
where I
that.
agree with you.
Yeah.
To caveat that, obviously, the alternative site assessment is a review undertaken sort of thing. It's not an entire alternative site assessment itself.
Sure.
So there may be additional sites that have not been picked up there.
Right.
Given 97% of the district is not greenbelt, there's many, potentially many other sites. However, if the review, the Gerald Eve review had come back and said, this alternative site assessment the appellant has done is very foolproof, it's got everything in it, then yes, to the answer to the question, I would have recommended approval.
Okay.
But that isn't what Gerald Eve concluded.
No, but we've moved on from Gerald Eve. We've now had the evidence in front of the inquiry, and we know what the position is. We've had it clearly agreed already. We know that other sites are not coming forward and will not come forward to meet this need. And as we've agreed several times, even with the appeal scheme in place, there will be a critical unmet need for this type of care. Yes?
Yes, but I need to caveat just slightly because obviously there are potentially many other sites that could come forward.
Okay. Which ones are those?
So I'm afraid to interrupt. I'm concerned because my bit's now been examined about alternative sites. In essence, the candidate is going to come tomorrow. It means I'm going to be denied something.
It's okay, I can hear anyway.
Cross-examine. Also, my witness is being, my learned friend is eliding concepts of need of alternative
Well,
sites.
that's-
I'm not sure my witness is quite picked up in the distinction, but they're now being that's a bit more polite way of putting it, but tricked into
Ooh.
agreeing to
Ooh.
various things on the basis of need rather than alternative sites. I'm not suggesting that friends don't be just dishonourable, anything like that.
No.
More diplomatic way of putting it. But my witness has now made a number of answers about needs, and now that's been translated into alternative sites.
Well, you've got the answers very, very clearly, sir, and there's re-examination to come. I take very, very dim view of the use of the word trickery, absolutely none of that, and I hope that's firmly.
Is this Canada?
Let's deal with the point that you've accused me of behaving inappropriately in cross-examination. I do want that withdrawn, please. The suggestion that I have tricked anybody is. Thank you. Is it withdrawn or not?
I full word trick.
Thank you very much. Right, I'll carry on then, sir, and there's re-examination to follow, of course.
Yes, you can ask about Mr. Canavan, but
I'm dealing with planning balance, sir, and of
yes,
course.
well, I did. So I have said already, I don't want this cross-examination to focus on things that have been discussed
No.
through the roundtable session.
That's
I
fine.
think I've got the point from the council that they've got issues with the robustness of the assessment. I've noted that point, and I've got your point as well, Mr. Walton.
Thank you.
The question I'd ask is, where's the continued questioning going to take me? Is it going to help me? And if it is, then
Yeah, so well, I'm wrapping up now in terms of options for you in the event that you reach certain conclusions on the evidence. And it's the point actually just put into evidence by Mr. Phillips, which was if Gerald Eve had come back and said, look, that's a robust assessment, your professional recommendation would have been for approval. Yeah.
That is correct.
And putting that another way, it's if the conclusion is that there aren't reasonable alternatives, if that's the conclusion, then permission should be granted.
Going, yes, but the
Yes.
caveat that going, the Geraldine report wasn't an alternative site assessment. It
No.
was a high level review of their alternative site assessment.
Yeah, I know what it was, but it's really straightforward. It's, had they told you that the site assessment was fine, you would have recommended approval. And another way of putting exactly the same point with respect is that if the conclusion reached now is that there aren't reasonable alternatives, that our work has been, on the evidence, there aren't reasonable alternatives, obviously you would recommend approval.
Yes, however, just caveat, obviously I would want it to be independently verified if I was going to give that personal recommendation.
Yeah, of course, we're dealing with hypotheticals
Yeah.
here. If the inspector were to conclude that there aren't reasonable alternatives on the evidence, there aren't sites coming forward to meet this need, what he should do at that point, in your view, would be to grant permission.
Yes, if the inspector, sorry, you sir, were of the view that there were no other alternative sites like to come forward, that their review was, not that their review, their alternative assessment was robust, then yes, I could see why you would recommend approval.
Great. Okay, and then finally, can we just go to CD 4.1?
Right, CD 4.1 is,
Thank you. That's the 5-year housing land supply.
Yeah, it's a 5-year housing land supply, 1st of April 2022 to 31st of March 2027. Published on the 12th of August. 2022.
or independent, intermediate review.
It's not the interim position.
Give me a second.
As far as I'm aware, no, it's,
Yeah, we can go to any other document. I don't think anything significant has changed. So if we go to this, then we can see if we can get through it in good time. If you scroll all the way through this document to the end, so page 76 of 77.
Sorry, I'm just going to try and find the document. I can't put my hand straight on it. So which
Oh,
document?
sorry.
it's okay, take your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Should be
CD
there.
4.1.
4.1.
4.1.
Can I have a page number as well, Mr. Watson?
Yes, on your PDF version, 76 of 77.
5.1, you say?
Sorry, 4.1.
4.1. Apologies.
No, not at all.
So is this the last 2 pages?
Yes.
Yes, the last 2 pages of the document.
And so this is the, sorry.
Folder seems to have, and the one I've been given seems to start at falling apart and it starts at 4.4. It starts at lottery funds. Yeah. This one should start 4.1, but it looks like half of it's gone walkies.
So alternatively, does anyone have an electronic version?
Okay, thank you.
And so if you turn to the last pages of that, the last 2 pages, you've got some tables.
Is that tab C.2?
Yeah. And you can see that that's headed projected delivery of older people's accommodation C2 in the 5-year period.
Yes,
Yeah, and we can see that goes through to 2025, 2026.
that's correct.
Okay, and we've got, if you go back into the text immediately above it, it says, the supply from dwellings within the 5-year period should be increased by 97 dwellings to reflect provision of older people's accommodation in the C2 use class. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. And that's talking about that point about ratio converting C2 units into dwelling numbers, isn't it? And that's the adjustment.
yes, that's under the above, for example, 50-bed care home,
Yeah,
sorry, how it works out, yeah.
And then when we come to the table itself, the first site is called Scottsdale Garden Centre,
That's correct.
and that's a care home, a 75-bed care home, we can see.
Yes,
And so that's not relevant to our need, is it?
and no, if we're talking about a slightly different care provision here, this is the extra, it's
Yeah.
not extra care.
And then the next one is a land parcel east of To the Shade Soham. And that's a 70-bed care home.
That's correct.
And you can see, if you look, just toggle between those two, whilst they're 75-bed and 70-bed, in the next column, supply as dwellings, they've been changed to 50 and 47.
Yes,
And that, add those two together and you get the 97 that the council's assessment thinks should be added to the 5-year supply of housing. So that's the source. It's those two those two care homes that give you the 97, isn't it?
yes,
And so there aren't any extra care schemes coming forward on the council's own analysis in the period up to 2025, 2026, are there?
there's no extra care.
No. And actually, we can look just to round it off. The third one in this column is in fact Kennet, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So that's the sustainable garden village. And again, on the council's own analysis, that's not coming forward to deliver any extra care inside before 2025, 2026.
Again, I have to say, it's going to market, so I don't know how long it take to actually come forward for reserve matters and be built.
Yeah, sure. But this is the latest analysis, isn't it? From the council?
2025, I couldn't see it having reserve matters and built in the next 2 years.
Okay, you couldn't.
Could not.
No, okay, great. And actually, what we can see there on the right-hand side is the site includes development of a care home, and capacity of the care home remains to be confirmed through the planning process. I think it's your point here, just confirm what you've just said. The phasing plan indicates the development of the care home wouldn't form part of the first phase, and therefore is not expected within the 5-year period. So that's confirming the point you just made, isn't it?
Yes. So what? Yes. To clarify, well, the housing has come forward already on Kennet, and the road I think is being constructed.
Yeah.
The care hasn't. It's still going to market.
Good. And so with taking everything that you now know, not just the position you adopted when you got that report back from Gerald Eve, given you know that there aren't any sites coming forward to meet the need in the timescales we're talking about. There's nothing before the inquiry to suggest any sites anywhere are coming forward. And given it's common ground that even with the scheme in place, there'll be that critical unmet need in 2026. That's an unacceptable situation, isn't it? As we've already agreed.
Yes.
Yeah. And so given that unacceptable situation, can I ask you again professionally, why on earth wouldn't you grant planning permission for this scheme to make an unacceptable situation at least a little bit better? Why wouldn't you do that?
Because you, as a planning officer, you have to do all the merits of the application and all the harms, because obviously anything that causes harm could be in itself unacceptable. So substantial harm in the green belt, if you just took that, would be an unacceptable development.
Okay.
So if you want me to go through the weightings, I'm very happy to.
No, I don't need you to. I just wanted to understand, because it is very much the last 2 minutes of questions, but when you decided to refuse this scheme, as it were, you were under the view that it was highly likely that this care need would be met through schemes coming forward in the urban areas. And we now know on the evidence that's not right, is it? It's not highly likely at all.
The review, as I keep, I have to be careful, because obviously that one bit, which is where I got that argument from, is a review done by Gerald Eve, who've done a review of the alternative site assessment, which are a wider area of professional expertise in order to say whether something could or couldn't be done. That he came back and said the alternative site assessment, which is based on all this discussion, is not robust.
Okay.
So I just have to put my professional opinion was on that jail leave report.
Absolutely. Yes, that was then, but I want to know the position now at the end of all of this, in light of everything you've heard. You're obviously not contesting that it's highly likely that this can be accommodated elsewhere. As we've agreed multiple times, there's no evidence to support that. In the light of the position as it now stands, the right decision, obviously, would be to grant permission, wouldn't it?
That lead, I have to say no, because obviously there's two parts that I got. First bit is the need argument, which is the need I'm not objecting to. But if you just took that element of it, which is why I referred to the Secretary of State decision. So both parties have agreed there's substantial harm to the green belt. And in that Oxfordshire appeal, they gave it significant weight despite them being twice the need as we do. So the Secretary of State, which is where, as you can allude to, is where a lot of this comes from, making sure the need is provided, have agreed that's significant. So if you weigh significant benefits of twice the need of care against substantial harm to the green belt, the substantial harm to the green belt would still outweigh that significant benefit.
Okay. Last question, I promise. When you refused the scheme, you were under the view that it was highly likely that this need could be met elsewhere. You reached a finely balanced decision. Your understanding of the likelihood of this need being met elsewhere has fundamentally changed, hasn't it, since you wrote your report? It must have done.
There's obviously more evidence being considered, so yes.
So a fundamental change of position and a finely balanced decision, that change of position can only go in favour of the grant of permission, can't it? It doesn't make the scheme worse, it makes the scheme a lot better in planning policy terms, doesn't it?
It has more weights in favour of it, yes.
Finely balanced decision, it has a lot of weight in favour, it must do, doesn't it? The fact that you can't point to a single site and you're now not of the view that it's highly likely this need will be met outside the green belt. That must be a fundamental change of position on your part, mustn't it?
Again, I know what you're trying to allude to, but or come to, I should say. However, there are other sites which we've identified. The difference in where I think me and you are coming from is the time frame those could come forward in, whether they are ready in 1 year, 2 years, or they might be coming forward in a slightly longer time frame. Because the review on the alternative site assessment is done on a basic understanding of what sites could come forward. It wasn't a full review done by the council. It's not in itself an entire alternative site assessment. So there may be many more other pieces of land which are more acceptable. However, the bit I would agree with, none of those have yet come forward, and there have been obviously no C2 extra care being approved in the plan periods apart from the Bottisham Court one.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smythe, opportunity for re-examination.
Thank you. Just one matter. You were asked a question about site 2, I think, about spades in the ground within 5 years, but units not being built, and you were pressed on. Sorry, forgive me. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, sorry. And then you press it that therefore that wouldn't be a reasonable alternative, and you said that that would also apply to the appeal site not coming forward in 5 years. Can you take up core document 1.15a?
CD 1.15.
And then A is the statement of community involvement.
That's in here, just little CD 1.15.
That's fine if you've got that.
Yeah.
So it's dated February 2023.
That's correct.
And if you turn to the introduction 1.11,
Yes.
we've got the January 2020 statement of community involvement. You see that?
Yes.
And then if we go to paragraph 2.1.2, we've got a section titled Discussions with the Bottisham Parish Council.
Yes.
The applicant first contacted Bottisham Parish Council by email on X 2019. Then the next paragraph, the applicant continued to keep Bottisham Parish Council updated on development proposals via email throughout 2019. And at the very bottom, it says a formal meeting between the applicant and Bottisham Parish Council took place on the 5th of December 2019.
That's correct.
So with those references in mind, could you explain to the inspector why you said that the appeal site wouldn't have come forward within 5 years based on that parameter?
We're already, yes, of course, we're already at the end of 2023. So that's 4 years already gone. Obviously reserve matters needs to come forward. So developer, if permission, you grant permission, they would have to go out to market. Then someone would have to buy the site, and then they would have to go in for reserve matters. Then the site would have to be built, following all discharge of relevant conditions. I could not see that all being achieved within the 5-year time frame if starting in early 2019.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Thank you. So that concludes the case for the council.
Okay, thank you. Just bear with me, Mr. Phillips. Might have a question. Okay, so just going back, there was a point that was raised right at the start. You'll have to cast your mind back. Right at the start of cross-examination, a question put by Mr. Walton in relation to just so I'm clear on your answer, because I wasn't entirely sure what the answer was. And again, you can qualify your answer if you wish. So the question was, if the scheme benefits would clearly outweigh the harms, the development, it would be in accordance with the development plan, and therefore planning permission should be granted. Mr. Walton, that was yes. Okay. So can I just have your answer? Do you agree with that statement or not? And yes or no, and happy for you to qualify that answer.
Yes, they would have to that you could grant permission. However, I would need to qualify that. So in the local plan, there are lots of policies, as is normal with any local plan. There's also growth 5, which basically allows for any sustainable development, which if you want to take their accounts on page 40. Obviously, would be a process you would have to go through. You would have to advertise it as departure from the local plan if you're going against any or more than one policy. However, the local plan in its entirety is seeking to bring forward sustainable developments, and it's those policies that are what are seeking to bring that forward. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes. I think the point I'm making is the only route to allowing or granting planning permission one where a scheme would be in compliance with the development plan, or conversely, is the only route to dismissing or refusing planning permission, the scheme would not be in compliance with the development plan?
Going for theoretical sort of thing. Obviously, if a scheme went against one policy in the local plan, you could still approve the application as long as you explained why other material considerations outweighed that harm or failure of that one bit of the policy.
That's okay. That's what I was asking, really, just the route by which permission could be granted or refused in relation to the point that was made by Mr. Walton. I've got no further questions or observations to make. So just to say, Ms. Phillips, thank you. You have sat there for quite a long time. You had a short break, but thank you for this afternoon's evidence.
Thank you.
It's now 4:20, so I suggest that we don't hear from the final witness today, and we hear from Mr. Brown first thing in the morning.
So I've got some admin
housekeeping points, if that would assist.
Yes, so can I just deal with Mr. Smythe first?
Yes.
There's obviously been some disagreement in terms of the evidence. You did make a point about the witness appearing tomorrow. Is there anything that I need to be aware of, or any issue that you'd like to raise at this stage, and we can try and address it before tomorrow's session?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
What we've got, sir, is an agreed itinerary. Yeah,
I believe so.
yep. So that's been printed off. We'll hand you a itinerary for your site view, sir, which has got a helpful colour plan on the back.
Have we heard from Mr. I keep mispronouncing his name. Is it Ogborn? Yes, Ogborn, sorry.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, what we can do is we're announcing it live now. So anyone is here in the room, this can be put on the internet. And if Mr. Ogborn says, actually, thanks for that, but I want you to go and see this viewpoint too, no doubt contact can be made. That's, I think, probably as fair as we can do it.
okay, so I'll accept this document as inquiry document 20,
Thank you, sir.
which is just a confirmation. People can't, if people are observing, this is a suggested route for the inspector's site visit, which I'm now going to ask the appellant just to talk me through.
So all it is a document which on its face gives you in tabular form on page 1, your suggested route with points 1 through 9 marked on. Then in terms, it gives you some documents which you might want to have with you on the site, and gives you the viewpoints in those documents on the right-hand side. And then over the leaf, it gives you critically the viewpoints we would like you to go and see. I don't think our position changes at all, and I know we haven't yet got confirmation from Mr. Ogborn. We still don't see any need for you to be accompanied on site. Depending on timings tomorrow, I think we can make sure you can get into site unmolested by any sheep or anything like that, and you're good to go. But at the moment, I don't think you need to be on site, accompanied on site.
And this has been agreed with the council. Just looking at viewpoint 1, and I can probably just deal with this on the site. Will that address the heritage? So particularly the impact on the setting of Bottisham House, and particularly the wall, which is an important feature of that boundary.
You're very close to it. So whether
So I'd be able to
shift
just,
across
yes,
it, then
okay.
absolutely. Yeah,
There'll be no problems seeing that. That's fine. Thank you.
So, yeah, yeah. Please don't feel constrained only to walk from point to point. So it's all yours, as it were. Then what we have got is we've got some statements as the finalized version of the section 106. All agreed. We've got a clean draft for you, and then we've got a document. Hopefully, is it tracked with?
I think it is tracked. Just send the electronic version.
Yeah.
Which
Yes.
is tracked in colour.
We've got a tracked version flagging up the changes since the last version that you saw. There are other options, which is one here called changes since previous appeal, but I don't think you need that.
No, and if there's a clean version, I'm happy just to accept the clean version as opposed to the tracked one.
Here it is.
Would you like it electronically as well?
Yes, if you could send that to the normal address, and I might receive that this evening. So this will be document 21.
Yes, sir. Okay, I think that then is it from us in terms of housekeeping. Yes, sir, that's it from us in terms of housekeeping.
Okay, so I think the timetable, we'll just need to have a brief look at the timetable. So is the room to be vacated by 2 o'clock tomorrow? In which case we'll aim to finish before 1 o'clock, so that we can, I'm sure the room needs rearranging, etc. And we can have lunch, and I'll then do the site visit, and that's likely to be unaccompanied unless things change in the intervening period. So tomorrow morning, it will be the evidence given by the appellant and then cross-examination by the counsel. And the timings were kindly given to me a few hours ago, and I've completely forgotten. I think we said an hour and a half, approximately. An hour, okay. including examination in chief, so it's probably about an hour and a half, we think. All in, yes, okay. So is a 9:30 start amenable? Or would you prefer 10 o'clock?
I don't think we need to start at 9:30 to finish by lunchtime. We'll have that and have conditions in Wednesday. I think we'll get people up to.
Okay, shall we start at 10 tomorrow then? The intention being that I'll review the conditions in particular and the 106 this evening. And hopefully I'll be able to provide some comments to help with the session. And then that brings the closing submissions, I don't think should be tomorrow because we can't guarantee the availability of the room in the afternoon. It's probably going to be quite late on. I also might get changed for the site visit. So, and I think having, it's usually advocates tell me that additional time is beneficial. However, if Friday is a real constraint for anybody, please do tell me now. Okay, so we'll do closings on Friday morning in person. So that's a slight change to the timetable. The only other point, again, and I've mentioned it before, it's just the clarity over the plans, the two plans, and whether it meets the requirements of access in terms of what's in the Development Management Procedure Order 2015. Does it satisfy those requirements? And does that mean anything for my decision or not? So if you could update me on that as well. Okay, in closings, yeah, that's fine.
Could I just ask a question of the other side? Will there need to be any additional conditions to include that?
We'll certainly have to think our way around that.
Okay.
Yes, we can probably just touch upon that in condition session tomorrow and think about that. And I don't think it's.
I was only asking, so in case they want to send me some draft wording beforehand, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else people would like to tell me this evening before we leave? The weather's not very good for tomorrow afternoon, so I think I need to bring a raincoat or some suitable footwear as well. So I think an unaccompanied visit is probably beneficial to everybody apart from myself, but we'll see. Okay, so we are going to adjourn now. It's 4:30 and we will reconvene at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I will send some information through in relation to conditions and you should receive that in the morning. So have a good evening, everybody. And thank you, everybody who's participated today.